So, you guys have any questions? The lady from CNN.
Surely you'll need more staff writers if you're going more digital. How will you attract more writers for the Mount Mercy Times?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's a struggle every year. To be fair and truthful, that's not really true, because we're doing is strategically reducing the size of the print whole. As I said, when I came here 20 years ago, there was a staff of 3 that put out the Mount Mercy Times on a schedule that was a bit more aggressive than we put it out now. Students will tend to overestimate the number of people that are needed to produce a newspaper, although you do have to have a fairly dedicated core. I would say, and this is about the size of our editorial team in recent years, we need about 6 people. But if 4 of them are devoted to print, that means 2 of them are devoted to digital. And if the editor-in-chief is devoted to both, that will make a huge difference. Yes, we need to attract people to the Times. That's always an ongoing challenge. Jocelyn, you're absolutely right. I'm hoping that we can produce some videos that will be a bit interesting and exciting and that will be helpful. I'm hoping that the digital nature of this initiative will meet students where they are and produce content that might energize some students. Students tend to think of print journalism as being old-fashioned, and it is, but it is still the kind of writing that corporate America pays for now, so it's still important. But it's not necessarily how students get their information, and so part of what we're trying to do is meet the audience, and hopefully that will excite the audience and get more of the audience engaged. It wouldn't be easy. It's not going to be as direct as that, and Jocelyn, I wouldn't lie to you and tell you that that's easy. Anybody who's going to be on the editorial team next year needs to recognize that one of the challenges is to get other people engaged as much as they can. But yes, we would need more people devoted to digital. Part of my solution for that is to create a print product that's easier to put out, so more of the time and energy of a staff that's the same size can go to the digital initiative.
Thank you.
Jackson?
So this question...
So I'm going to say you're from the Gazette.
Alright. So this question is sparked from your answer to Jocelyn's question. And so with you guys going towards more the social media route and the digital route, do you think that will attract more writers for you guys?
I don't know that it will. I hope that it does. Honestly, one of the things that has helped us the most in recent years is Mount Mercy has just, I think within the last 3 years, started a writing scholarship. And writing scholars have to produce things for media. I hope more of those writing scholars will become active in the Times, again, because I'm hoping that the digital thing will excite students some. But I think it's important for writers to recognize that print artifact will still be there and still be important to them in terms of artifact and portfolio. And there's still a significant audience, believe it or not, on campus. The knock against students is that they don't read. Well, that's a broad generalization and not really true. There are students that still look at this paper. There are certainly faculty and staff that look at this paper. There are nuns living in the convent who look at this paper. So paper isn't irrelevant. But yeah, I'm hopeful that it will do that. I don't know. Nobody knows the future. But I think it's whether it does or not, by the way, I still think it's the right thing to do, because I think it will give the students at this media outlet a more modern media experience that they need. Other questions? I don't know, can I give Jenna this one? Okay, so the lady from Little Village Magazine.
When would this shift be made to digital?
Well, we already have a website. In fact, we're the only student organization in Mount Mercy that actually has control of its own website. So in essence, the shift has already begun. But the website isn't particularly prominent or updated before the print product comes out. It's more a place where we put stuff that we produce from print. So it's not creating something that doesn't already exist. It's leveraging what we're already doing and trying to bump it to the next level, so to speak in a cliche, but a relevant cliche. And one thing that the university did last year is they bought some new video equipment, which is stored right next to the Times office. And so part of what I'm trying to do, again, is to use tools that the university already has that are underutilized to give students a more modern media experience. Jenna, remind me what the question was. I want to make sure that I actually answered it.
When the shift to digital.
Oh,
will begin.
okay. And we've talked about a shift to digital a lot in recent years. What we haven't done is we haven't done it right at the beginning of the school year. And so what I want to do is work with next year's editors so that, for example, during orientation week, we post orientation week coverage during orientation week and not in mid-September when the first issue comes out. And that we can say things at the beginning of the year, that we produced our first video in August rather than waiting until March, right? So I want there to be a clear difference in the way that this media outlet operates at the beginning of the year. And I want new editors to go into it thinking about how they make a different kind of product and media mix that's more attractive to students. So I would say the shift primarily is right at the beginning of the school year next year. I would also say, Jenna, that one thing we can do is a preview, and again, this would depend upon who's around and what they're willing to do. Maybe we cover graduation this year in the digital format, and that would be sort of our first test run of this new digital first strategy that we're pursuing.
Yesterday at dinner in the Macaulay cafeteria, I saw 2 Mount Mercy Times papers from the recent issue in the trash can. With switching to digital and reducing print, you said, do you think that will have a better impact on the environment at Mount Mercy?
Yes-ish. That is always a challenge. We print 1,000 copies of the Mount Mercy Times. To be honest with you, if it were up to me, if I were king of the world, we would not print that many. But the problem is, and this is sort of a reality of the mechanics, 1,000 copies is the minimum press run that a small press can do. We can't have fewer copies. And, you know, a student newspaper, unfortunately, I mean, there's all kinds of barriers we face in terms of, you know, how we distribute. It used to be, not that many years ago, that the bookstore was run internally and that campus mail was run internally, and it was easy for us to distribute the Times to mailboxes. It's not impossible for us to do it now, but it's a hassle, and so we don't do it. And so that's several hundred copies of the Times that are in racks rather than in mailboxes. Of course, most people took them out of the mailboxes and threw them away too. Encouraging people to get engaged with the paper and putting content in there that engages people is an ongoing challenge. So yeah, the environmental question, you know, newsprint is produced from Canadian forests. Those Canadian forests, for the most part, are tree farms. And so the newsprint isn't coming from old growth forests that are being destroyed. It's more like long-term crops like cornfields in a way. I mean, that's a bit disingenuous, but it's not completely false either. And so the environmental impact isn't quite as bad as you might think. But there is an environmental cost to producing any print publication. And also the one environmental friendly thing that we're doing is just by reducing the size of the publication to begin with, we're reducing the amount of waste that we're producing. Plus, if you saw it in the trash, in my mind, that means somebody probably picked it up and read it before they threw it away, which is not a bad thing. I just wish they'd recycled it rather than throw it in the trash.
Thank you.
So this question is about the time it takes to get the news out to the people. Do you think that this move to the digital side will make it quicker or maybe more efficient of a way to get the news to people?
Well, yes, exactly. And that's important. One of the things that the Times will have to think about is how do we control the information? The only reason the university lets us have our own website is that it falls under the same editing umbrella that our print product does. That tends to slow things down a little. On the other hand, one of the indirect benefits of COVID-19 and the pandemic is it has forced the Times to switch to online digital editing, which means editing can take place in an environment where it can be done more quickly. And so the Times will have to develop systems and protocols to make sure things get edited before they get posted. But honestly, we already have those in place. It's a question of not thinking in terms of an every 2-week cycle, but what do we need to edit today and then post today? We don't need to wait until it's ready for print. The other thing too, and again this is sort of a technical thing, It's a lot easier to update things online. I think students who haven't done it think it's harder, but you guys have a blog post. How hard is it for you to post a blog post? Right? Technically, how much time does it? It might take you a little while, but frankly, it doesn't take a long time. And the Montmorency Times is run through WordPress, our website. Updating a story online is not much different than updating a blog. It's just a matter of recognizing that it's ready and somebody posting it.
Thanks.
But yes, speed of delivery is one of the advantages of the digital world, and I hope that we do that. We need to do it in a responsible way so that we don't lose control of our product. Again, we're going to do more social media stuff, but whoever is tweeting on our behalf or putting things on Instagram needs to recognize that they still have the responsibility to act responsibly when they do that.
So what are the sorts of online media that the student body can expect to see on social media?
Well, they should see it now. Again, this year we made some attempts to be more active. But we, I think, spend so much time and so many resources on producing the newspaper that we tend to neglect it. And I understand psychologically why that is, right? For an editor, for Jada Vesey, who's going to make some big news today, and I'm really proud of it. For Jada Vesey, this is her baby. This is the thing that she has spent years working on. The website right now does not get a lot of traffic, right? And anybody who's a performer, writer, actor, singer, do you perform in the venue where you get the crowd, or do you perform in the venue where nobody seems to come? Right? Part of the strategy of the switch is to make sure that we're producing stuff that drives people to our digital site, which we're not doing as good of a job as we need to. And that creates the social media stuff that we can do. One of the reasons that we use WordPress, by the way, Jenna, it's a small technical thing. It's a thing maybe to remember about your own blogs. But WordPress makes it very easy to create URLs to individual pieces. Right? On your own website now, if you click on any of your headlines, when you have several headlines, you will see the URL at the top change, and it will have part of your heading. That's one of the reasons your heading is important. You can share a link, a permanent link, to an individual blog post. Right? And so just by having it on the Times website on WordPress, that means that we are creating links to individual stories that we can then share. What we don't have, Jenna, is a system of being active and sharing it. If that makes sense.
In the switch of trying to become more media focused, do you plan on opening a specific editor position for social media?
We have a specific editor position for web now. Again, I would hope that the editor and managing editor are more active. The way the Montmorency Times works, and this is something that I hope you guys will get into, I didn't actually indicate it, but I said, next year's editors, a logical question to me as a journalist would be, when are next year's editors named, and who are they going to be? There's a board of student publications that oversees the Times. They name the editor-in-chief. That's the only external body that's involved in the internal workings of the Times. That editor-in-chief and I get to make decisions about who has what titles. What the editor can't do is they can't say, I want to have 12 editors next year. There's no budget for that. They're only going to have about 6 editors. But the roles and titles of those 6 editors are sort of a deal between me, the editor, and the students that apply for those positions. So if we have an editor, managing editor, sports editor, news editor, maybe we have a web editor and a social media editor. Right? Or maybe it's editor, managing editor, video editor, sports editor, web editor, social media editor. Right? I'm not, and the titles aren't as important as where the organization puts its time. But what I'm saying is whoever leads the team, the student that leads the team, has the flexibility to change those titles and roles as long as they can find students that are willing to fulfill those titles and roles. So yes, maybe. On the other hand, I would say, again, you guys know that I'm an experienced blogger. How hard is it for me to tweet and put something on Facebook about a blog post that I do? I do it all the time. I do it routinely. It takes like 10 seconds of my life when I do that. The big part is to produce the content. The quick part is to share it on social media. And the big thing about the Times is that it's not in the habit of doing that social media sharing. If it were in the habit, it wouldn't take a lot of staff energy and time to do. We have, in years past, we've had a social media editor. I'm a bit reluctant to say that we would do that again, just because that social media editor was not all that effective. Mostly, again, because if you're producing the stuff, nothing keeps you from sharing it right then anyway. Jocelyn, I don't mean to discount that idea though, because I think that again, if we're making the shift, we have to reconfigure how we think about the paper. And as long as we find somebody who is really willing to be active in social media, that might be a very good move. Okay, you guys need some writing time soon. Is there anything that you haven't asked about that you want to ask? Or let's go around and each of you ask 2 follow-up questions, just quick follow-up questions. Remember, you can use closed-ended and open-ended questions. Pause for a second and take a look at your notes and try and figure out what else might you need for this story. And one question to ask yourself is, what is the news here? And what do I want to know about the news here? Also, you could ask yourself, is there anything I can ask Joe? He's a willing source and you know that he yaks forever. But is there anything I can ask Joe that will give me the quote that I want on a topic that I don't have a quote on yet? And as a matter of course, just, I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to think, but then just because I'm left-handed, I'm going to start to my left and go to my right, and each of you gets to ask one question, one question, one question, one question, one question, one question. We'll do a quick bonus question round here at the end. All right, Jocelyn, you start.
Going more media focused, seeing that you're going to probably try and expand that onto online, will the Mount Mercy Times still mostly cover Mount Mercy University, or will it somewhat expand to citywide?
I like the idea of expanding a little bit to citywide, although we sometimes do that now. In the current print edition that I'm bragging to you guys about, for example, the mask story honestly is a national story, even though it's localized to Mount Mercy. On page 4, you see there's a story about banning mouse in Tennessee school district. We do already now try and do news from the world that affects Mount Mercy. One thing, Jocelyn, that we could maybe think about is, do we want to let people know what's going on in Cedar Rapids that might be of interest to college students in a more organized way? That would be sort of an expansion into the community. But our news focus has been and should continue to be not just what's happening on the Hill, but what's happening that's important to the Hill, including what's happening in the world, or in Cedar Rapids or in Iowa. By the way, you said a media focus. Remember that this is sort of digital media focus. We're already media focused. It's just we're changing the medium a bit. Jenna?
Why is this shift important to the student body?
The shift is important to the student body because the medium is important to the student body. And it's a way of positioning the Mount Mercy Times to continue to be relevant in the future. It also reflects my desire to leave a legacy for Mount Mercy, right? I'm old, which I know is shocking to you, Jenna. But that means that I'm not going to be here, right? I'm not retiring this year. I'm not retiring immediately. I have several years left. But we need to lay a foundation for a vibrant student media that continues, because having student media is important to a student body. It's a way in which, very importantly, the students can express themselves, can say what's important to them. It can have that medium of expression so student writers can develop themselves. I've been at college campuses that have student media and ones that don't, and trust me, there's a hole in the universe where they don't. There's salt missing in the bread. And not every student recognizes that. Not every student comes from a household that gets newspapers or consumes news media a lot. But for a community, journalism plays a vital watchdog role and should continue to play that role. And it makes a difference to students even if they're not consuming the Times, although I hope we would encourage them to consume it. Jackson?